this morning's talk have been excellent. So I learned a lot, and a lot has been already said, what I want to talk about. But I would like to present our model, which is called our way model. And then I would like to show some applications of the model to the middle and upper Paleolithic population transition. So it has been wished whether the model can be more realistic. And I hope our model has becoming a bit more realistic. So this is the data set I plotted. I used the data from AXA on this chart. So every dot has a story. So of course, we would like to understand how we get this pattern and how the populations interact and what's the role of the climate, as has been mentioned this morning. Now, one story which is very interesting to archaeologists is the so-called the middle upper Paleolithic population transition. So what is this? So basically during the period, Heinrich events 5 and Heinrich events 4, roughly 50 to 38,000 Ka. So we witnessed a decline and extinction of the Neanderthals and an upsurge and expansion of the modern humans. So we have already heard from the earlier talk, the Iberia seems to be a very interesting place to study because the story goes that the modern humans migrated somehow from somewhere else to last to the Iberia, and it has been said the Iberia might be the last refugium, and there might be many hypotheses why the Neanderthals disappeared. It's also said that modern humans could be a reason for the extinction of the Neanderthals. So the story has been changing a lot in the history. I'm not an archaeologist, but I know the story has been changing all the time. So I've been told now about 100 of the middle Paleolithic size, only about 3 remained, which might be younger than, let's say, 40 Ka. So I heard the other day, the days could be much younger, so the story is still evolving. So can we learn something through modeling? Yeah. So this is the climate story. You probably already know. We are talking about the time period 50 to about 38. There are dramatic or quite significant climate changes during this period. Heinrich events 5, Heinrich events 4, but there are also interglacial, interstadial periods, as indicated by the red numbers there. So here, basically, there are many stories. So it seems to be reasonable to suggest that this transition can be divided into 3 time periods. We are relatively certain that the modern humans did not arrive there before 43. So therefore, between 50 and 43, only Neanderthals existed on the Iberia. It is somewhat uncertain what happened afterwards. So at about 43, the modern humans arrived in the northern part of the Iberia, and then between 41 and 38, we have a very long cold time period, which lasted almost 3,000 years. So therefore, I would like to argue this transition may be either successive or weakly interactive. So if we can assume that the Neanderthals still existed at the time when the modern humans arrived there. So this is our model, which looks very complicated, but this is just a principle, how we build this model. You can use the model to test the hypotheses, but we also hope that we can use the model to reconstruct something. So what you need is, of course, in the upper row, the databases. I do not want to repeat of that. And then we did the climate data. We rely on proxy data, global climate simulations, also high-resolution regional climate simulations. Now, the main question, which I really want to spend a bit of time to discuss with you colleagues, is how is the human system actually related to the Earth system? Now we have heard about the carrying capacities. We'll be having a lot of sessions about the niche modeling, and we talked about the habitats, what's that thing called? Habitability index. So all these things are somehow related. So, but I want to say something here about the so-called human existence potential. You might say, oh, they are similar, they might be the same thing, but I would like to give some interpretations of this what this human existence potential is, which is what I call HEP. So the relation in our model between the human system and the Earth system is really via the human existence potential. So we are also doing some work trying to model some of the human processes. This is on the way, which I'm not presenting here. Now, this is the idea, how you model this. We basically model the density, of course, which determines the population network and the human dispersal. But this density is really a manifestation of the human system with the internal dynamics and external forces. So what is, I'll talk about this human existence potential. Now, first of all, we need to find out the resources. This could be the MPP, this could be the temperature, this could be the precipitation, and that is the environmental condition set for humans to exist. I call this a human existence potential, environmental human existence potential. But this potential, we know is very, very high. The range is very large. It does not limit the density of the population because you can have a lot of resources exist, you cannot access it. To access the existing resource, you need technology. And therefore, we can define an accessible human existence potential, which I call the AC HEP. Okay, if this potential is accessible, then part of this is used, then the resource available for individual humans becomes less. And this is a traditional thinking in the population dynamics. So there's a population pressure. So therefore, we can define an available human existence potential. So what drives the motion of the population and the reproduction of the population is actually the available human existence potential. This is what I want to argue here. So you can see here at the green dot, that's the available human existence potential at the maximum. Therefore, people actually migrate to these locations. And if you end up with where the red dot is, the humans might extinct. Now, how do you get to this human existence potential? We would like to use the data before you even try to model the stuff. So we would like to integrate the data into the estimates of the human existence potential. This is much of the niche modeling we learned from that. So what we do is we use a quadratic, so logistical regression. So you know for every of these grid points, for example, the climate conditions, the topography, and the other things, the environmental parameters, you know the probability of the existence of the humans. At the archaeological sites, the probability of the human existence is 1, and we also know a priori there are places where humans could not survive. So using these two, the so-called records, we can then calculate the so-called environmental human existence potential. You modify this according to your understanding of the cultural aspects of the society to get accessible, which is this 5C. Now, this is an example. If you use the data, you use the climate data, you use the archaeological data, you get the different existing potentials. And these are for two cultures. The archaeologists know much better than me, the Solution and the epigravidian. So they are sort of two separate different cultures evolved from the same culture. But there are a lot of kinematic stuff you can do. For example, you can define the human catchment. And the humans will move from regions with low potential to regions of high potential. So this region acts as the catchment, and then also divide, as you can see from this the barrier. Right? So now the P I mentioned, they are the predictors. So embedded in these predictors can be many parameters. We already heard about this. So the climate parameters, the coastline distance, and the topography, the vegetation, the water body, the MPP, the soil fertility, animals. So all these things, if they are independent, they can be predictors. So we can then use logistic regression to estimate the existence potential. So of course, okay, I'm not doing climate modeling. So I do climate modeling, but I'm not doing global climate modeling. We use global climate models to simulate the climate, and then we do dynamic downscaling to get high resolution information we need. Also for the paleo things, you need to do a vegetation reconstruction, which we've also done. So this is an example for the region we are interested in for two different time slices. One is for the GI line, so the Greenland interstadial number 9, and the Greenland stadial 9. We know that's warm period, there's cold period. So this is a high resolution of the annual mean temperature, and you can see the difference between the two time periods as well. So of course, there's a set of parameters you need to use to calculate the existing potential, but I'm not showing you all those variables. I'm only showing you the results. First one is the existing potential for the modern humans. So the left one is for the warm period, and the middle one is for the cold period, and the right one is the difference between these two periods, so the warm minus cold. So as you can see here in the first graph, so there are the most archaeological sites are in the locations where the existing potential is high. And of course, there are also other regions where there are no sites, but still you have some decent existing potential. So with the climate change, with the cooling of the climate, the existing potential is in most areas much reduced. So, but of course, there are also areas like the blue areas indicate there are regions with higher existing potential. So this gives an indication where the refugium might be. So namely, they will land in the blue areas in the end. Yeah? So this is the human existence potential for the Neanderthals, again for the same time period, same slices, and again the warm periods, cold periods, and difference. Now here you see there are regions to the south of the central system on Iberia. So there are regions with a very low existing potential in the northwest coast, also regions with low potential. But in other coastal areas, you have high potential for the Neanderthal existence. Now, with the cold climate, so the picture, as you can see, the inland area becomes more, less habitable to the Neanderthals. I don't know how much time I have. I really want to talk a little bit about the model. And this morning, we see this equation 3 times from Verhulst. The density change, the population density change with time equals reproduction, net reproduction. And then we have this, this equation we also saw from Professor Solikov, I think so, the talk. So there's a carrying capacity called the rho C. The rho C here, I need to emphasize, this is a variable in space and time. So therefore, it's a rho C, x, y, and t. So now, if you write this equation in the Eulerian form, you get the equation like this. I realize this morning in most of the talks, there's no advection term, namely the blue term has been neglected. So I do not agree with that. I would like to keep that term. So I talk a little bit about this carrying capacity. The local carrying capacity is rho C. The local carrying capacity is now related to the existing potential we just derived. And that's a maximum value for this carrying capacity, which is culture dependent. If you talk about one culture, then you have one carrying capacity, and that's the maximum population density you can get at the best condition of the environment. So this culture carrying capacity evolves with time as well. So this is what we're trying to do. So now and then available. So the available potential depends on, of course, on the interactions between humans. We know from people who do population dynamics that at low population, the collaboration between the people increases the capacity to harness the resources. Therefore, the available potential actually increases with the density. But once the population density reaches a maximum, reaches a critical value, then you have a population pressure, and therefore the available human existence potential decreases with the density. So that's the typical curve. So embedded. So okay. So I want to talk a little bit about this advection. So advection was not included in the earlier talks. I would like to keep this term, because this causes the population to migrate to areas with higher human existence potential. If you assume steady state and the p equal to 0, if you only worry about diffusion, then you end up with a constant density. So that is not what we see, because we know people come from the regions to Busan to work, because Busan is a better place to live. So that's why we would like to keep this. It has a much more richer dynamics in the equation. So not only that, I would like to define a drift velocity which is proportional to the gradient of the available human existence potential. So I don't know what to talk about the other details. So now we know this formulation can be transformed to to a stochastic differential equation. So then we call this equivalence of the equation I just mentioned as constrained agent-based model. The agent do not just randomly diffuse, they do diffuse, but they have an orientation. Like you walk on the street, you can walk sideways, but you have to walk along the street. The street is then defined by the gradient of the available human existence potential. So if you have some humans in the center of this region with low human existence potential, normally if you only use diffusion, then they'll go everywhere. But okay, the end result is that the humans actually move to the regions where higher existence potential exists. So we have two versions. One is the large scale diffusion model for our wave model, and the other one is the agent-based, the constrained agent-based model. So first, the model application to the modern human migration on pan-European scale. So we assume that humans started at 45 at a place, the Levant. This is what people told me to do. So they diffuse from the Levant where the dot signet, and then they disperse over Europe. So we can divide this expansion into 4 periods. First one is the exploration between 45 and 43. It's a slow expansion because they have to move over the Anatolia. So it was also a cold time period. And then between 43 and 41, you see a very rapid expansion of the modern humans over Europe. And the population pattern almost repeat the archaeological size of the so-called Reconstruction phase 1. Reconstruction is a part of the modern human with a particular cultural feature. So as you can see for 41. So we know by 41 to 33, we have a very long cold period. So you see the significant population density decrease to 39. So if you compare these pictures, you can see that. And then after 39, shortly before 38, the population recovered very quickly, so that which actually reached all the archaeological sites we know of this culture. Actually, the population moved northward because of human adaptation, so I'm not going into details of that. Can you actually validate this model in any way? The most difficult thing is to validate the model in any way. So now, this information we have not used in our model is actually the time of arrival. So we compare the time of arrival with archaeological dating. For example, Bankakiro, most famous site, about 45.8 to 43.6. The model predicts 43.5. Of course, we started at 45, remember that. So we can start a little bit earlier, we'll be exactly in that range. So there are other sites you can compare. So the time of the modeled arrival is quite consistent with the dating. So very interesting is the Cantabrian. We have the site on the north coast of Spain at 43.3 to 40. That's according to dating. So the model predicted, I think, according to memory, is about 41. So I know from Spanish colleagues there's a huge debate about Lapo du Picarrero. There was a site dated 41 to 38. The model cannot predict that. The model predicts about 37. So it's much later than this, so we can now debate, so is there inaccuracy in the dating, or are there problems in the model, or there are actually some other reasons. The other thing we can validate is the routes, the corridors. People are very interested in the corridors. So the model can actually predict the corridors because the model models the population flux. The population flux we calculated over this 44 to 41 time periods, and we can reproduce the corridors known to the archaeologists. For example, the Balkan routes, the Alpine East, the Danube routes, and the Mediterranean coastal routes, and also the West European routes, which when people migrated further to the north to England. So this is the results. And now then let's have a look at the Iberia Peninsula. So what we did is we used the our model, constrained agent-based model for 3 populations: the Neanderthals, the modern humans, and the mix of the 2 populations over the time period of 50 to 38,000 years. And we then assumed, according to our earlier simulation, that the modern humans arrived at 43 in southwest France. So there are parameters we need to set. 2 important parameters, we heard in the earlier talk as well, is the reproduction rate and the culture carrying capacity C. For different species, we set the different parameters. And then we do the ensemble simulations. For each parameter set, we have 1,000 ensembles. Because it's a smaller region, we can do that. With the parameter Gaussian disturbed, all those parameters Gaussian disturbed by 10%. So this is the model results of the Neanderthal population distribution. And you have all those parameters listed there for A, B, C, D, E, and F. So basically here you have 3 situations. The first situation is you have a relatively high reproduction rate and you have a high culture carrying capacity. In that case, you see the picture A and you see the population distribution. Now, interestingly, you compare this with the size of the Neanderthal or the MP size, and this map actually matched the best with MP size. Now, of course, with reduced reproduction rate R and reduced carrying capacity C, the population distribution will be different. Now, the last 2 cases, E and F, for these 2 cases, I set the values relatively low. So the reproduction rate is, for example, 1%, and then per year. The carrying capacity is 1. That means every kilometer you can have 1 person. So in that, is that 1 kilometer, 100 kilometers? I can't remember. 100 kilometers, you can have one person. So very low carrying capacity. So this means almost extinction for the Neanderthals, but not 100% extinction. So these are the population size you get for these 6 rounds. The first one, you have 2,000 Neanderthals on the Iberia. I know from archaeologists that they're probably laughing at us. You can't get this kind of numbers, but I don't know which one is right. Basically, I don't know. They tell me 100 or something. I really don't know what is the total population size. But for the Neanderthal to survive, you do need a population size of about at least between 500 and 1,000 for them to survive in the middle. So in that case, I would call there is a chance for weakly interactive between the Neanderthals and the modern humans. Now, for very small c, of course, the population will become very low, about 200. There are chances in your ensemble that the population actually goes to 0. Yeah, so because this is the parameters are disturbed. So there's a chance for them to go to 0. But very interestingly, this is the dispersion of the modern humans. So they arrived in the western part of France, and then migrated to the coast of the Atlantic, and then they migrated to the Cantabrian. And very interesting to me, at least, is the possibility they migrate. We can probably see from this graph. They actually migrated first westward along the Cantabrian, and then they went to somewhere like the Madrid, and then migrated further south. The Spanish colleagues would know the Iberia frontier sort of hypothesis. For our model, this does not exist. Actually, people actually migrate at the coast, actually then into the valley. So in the second stage, after the 38, then the modern humans migrated further to the south along the coast. So this route here from the inland is very interesting to me, because nobody told me something like this. This is actually a model generation, hypothetic routes. So this is now in the weakly interactive mode, the distribution of the Neanderthals. So mostly at the coast and somewhere in the northern part in the plateaus area. Now this is the area where the interactions can happen. So basically in the Cantabrian area, the coast, the Atlantic coast of North Spain, and maybe at the coast of the Mediterranean, a small region, here. So I'll be very, very interested if somebody can tell me from the genomics whether this indeed happens. Now, the population size in the weakly interactive mode would be something like this. So the modern humans arrived at about 43, and then population grows, and then the Heinrich 4 events, then there's a dramatic reduction in the population size, about half of population size as before. The Neanderthals quite flat, relatively flat, not so dramatic. But of course, you can also see the influence of the climate change. So the last one would be the mix between the two populations. So a behavior very similar to the modern humans. Now, this would be the case with very, very low reproduction rate and low carrying capacity. So the population size is very small now, about 100, 200, but you still see areas where the Neanderthals survived. So this would be a prediction of the possible refugiums for the Neanderthals. So I have been thinking why they just don't die. They don't die in the model anyway. They don't extinct in the model. So I'm thinking maybe something's wrong with the very equation we're using, the logistic equation. In the logistic equation, you set a carrying capacity, you set a reproduction rate, if the change of these two quantities are not dramatic, then the population will not die. The other thing is the human existence potential in these areas are relatively stable despite climate change. So therefore, this is a prediction of the refugium. So I'm at the end of my talk. I would like to make a sort of introduction to our new project called Human and Earth System Coupled Research, the HESCOR. Please have a look at this website and be interested and help us with our research. Thank you very much.